Hello and welcome to Gardener's World.
Thank you.
With spring just around the corner, every gardener knows the excitement of making plans for the year ahead.
Ned, stop dancing. Good boy.
And for the next hour, we will be revisiting some of the most glorious gardens that we've been to, that are full of inspiration and guaranteed to get you in the mood for gardening.
Now, coming up on today's programme.
Adam is in Dublin with an exclusive backstage pass to the garden of YouTube-based guitarist Adam Clayton.
If you look back at your life and I suppose in some sense the madness of it, this is an incredible antidote to that.
I feel I'm lucky because it was all instinctive. I didn't know what this would mean to me. I didn't know that this would be a place that would draw me back and give me such kind of peace.
We visit a garden in Somerset that's full of quirky structures, all made from salvaged wood.
I never use a drawing, you do it all in your head, rather like an artist with a painting, you know. And once you start, you just keep going.
And Advolly visits the historic garden of Plas Brondanw, set within the beautiful landscape of the Eryri National Park.
This is an architect's garden, based around the views and vistas of the surrounding mountains. And when you're surrounded by such an incredible landscape, the results are breathtaking.
As the days lengthen and the sun's warmth increases, our gardens unfurl into a rich tapestry of colour.
Good boy, go on. Look at these. Aren't they beautiful? Keep going.
And last March, Adam travelled to Dublin to visit a garden owned by rock royalty.
You may be surprised who the custodian of this garden is. I am. I've watched him over the years a lot, but most of the time he's been on a stage with a guitar. It's U2's Adam Clayton. Yeah, he's rock and roll royalty, but I got the sense he knows a little bit about gardening too. I walked in and instantly got goosebumps. You have created something here that is magical.
Well, I think this is an adolescent garden in reality. You know, I've put 30 years into planting and shaping it, and it's, you know, I can just see what it's going to be. I might not be around for it, but I can see where it's headed.
Take you right back to the beginning. How did this all start?
Well, the very beginning was, for me, I went to a boarding school at the age of 13, which is literally over the other field there. And I used to kind of look over the wall and come in here, and, you know, the early days of smoking cigarettes and having a drink. I'd come in here and there was this lovely little river that ran through it. Anyway, fast forward to, we're looking for somewhere to record the Joshua Tree, and our management picked this house, and I'm going, oh my goodness, this is like one step over from my boarding school. How weird to come back here. So we recorded the album here, and at the end of the recording, the owner said, look, if any of the band want to buy the house, you know, I'd be up to taking the cost of the rental off the house.
Right.
And I thought, oh, there's a bit of a deal there. And I didn't really know what I had, but I knew that whatever happened after the Joshua Tree, I did not want to be walking out my front door into a street.
Yeah, because interesting, because I mean, that album, it was the bit that brought you to the world, wasn't it?
We had an inkling.
Yeah.
You know, we'd been around for a little bit, we'd done a few records, so we had an idea that we were onto something.
Yeah.
But I don't think we knew how it was going to change our lives.
So you've done that, You're 28 years old, was that right?
27, 28, yeah.
Bought the house. Had you gardened before?
I had a very, very sketchy knowledge of gardening. The only thing I knew about it was that I found solace outside, and I knew the mountain here. There's a mountain up the back here, and I used to go up that mountain with my teenage depression and look down over the city. So I knew I could get something from it.
But when you took it on, what sort of state was this place in?
It was seriously overmature. It had been let go. The woodlands were overrun with laurel, which was kind of suffocating everything. So we took on clearing the laurel out, and then we could see the bones of the garden.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of reconstruction to the river. But I realized if I planted trees, at some point I could make decisions later on. I just love the creation of forestry, you know, just planting trees and seeing it grow. And I mean, these trees are now 30 years old.
Since Adam took the garden under his creative wing, he's completely transformed its 17 acres, planting more than 4,000 trees and establishing some wonderful vistas. Seriously, I'm like a kid in a sweet shop. This is magical. I mean, obviously it's fun coming across this bridge. But when Adam got here, simple little river, few big trees, and then lots of laurel. And it's really clever, the way that he's introduced different types of falls as it goes down. It feels like the heartbeat to the garden. There's a rhythm. But the trees that he's added look so natural. It still looks like it's been here forever. There's tree ferns just through. It literally feels like another world. Throughout the garden, Adam's introduced over 50 varieties of camellia, which provide so much wonderful colour. Another passion of his are magnolias. By the river, there's the soft pink of Magnolia campbellii, and next to the lawn, a row of Magnolia cobus, native to Japan, with fragrant white flowers. How did magnolias suck you in?
Well, I first saw them in a valley in Mount Congreve, which is down in Waterford, and I couldn't believe the colour that you would see at the top of the tree line. The only magnolia I knew was the little suburban common or garden one that my mum, you know, cherished and planted, and every year she said, "Look at the magnolia, it's great."
And then we'd normally get a frost.
Yeah.
Like,
So then when I discovered these magnificent tree magnolias and the array of different colours, I was hooked. And for me, coming out of winter, you get that early flowering, you get that burst of colour, and then I kind of know, okay, summer's coming. And then I love rhododendrons, they're fantastic. Even when they're not in flower, the leaf colour is great. Funnily enough, I went to the Himalayas. I was on a trekking holiday, and I was up in the hills, and then I got to see them in their natural habitat. And I just thought, it's amazing. These things from this other culture and this other country come here, and they bring a little bit of that with them.
This garden is a delight. Even on the dullest days, the colours are shining through, both in the formal gardens by the house and the woodland by the river. Testament to Adam's creative eye.
This is what I call my greatest hits walk.
Yeah.
I come out of the house in the morning and I walk up the other side, up to the top waterfall, and then come down here. And that way I get everything that I need. And I don't know what it is about the fresh water, but whether it ionizes the air or something, it sets you up for the day.
What does gardening give you?
Well, it takes my mind out of myself. You know, I start to see the colours, I start to see the form, I start to note the time of year, and I just go into a different world. I think the garden tells you what it needs, and you just have to pay attention. And I do look at gardening the way the painters do. You know, it's shape, form, colour, and perspective, depth. So I just bring all those things to it, and I just let the garden lead me.
If you look back at your life and I suppose in some sense, the madness of it. This is an incredible antidote to that.
I feel I'm lucky because it was all instinctive. I didn't know what this would mean to me. I didn't know that this would be a place that would draw me back and give me such kind of peace.
The garden in spring sees the welcome return of old friends, but it also brings plenty of new arrivals too.
At this time of year, there are seedlings everywhere. Some of them are a delight, some of them you didn't know you had, they come from other parts of the garden. Some of them are in the wrong place. For example, have a look at this. That there is a purple hazel, and that's just appeared in the last day. Now, I suspect that's a hazelnut from the trees in the Jewel Garden that has been put there by a squirrel or a jay and buried and has popped up. Now, I don't want that there because, much as I like purple hazels, I don't want a socking great hazel tree in the path. So that can come up. How sweet is that? A little hazel tree, which I can put up and grow on. Now here you can see the fluffy foliage of fennel. But I like fennel, and I like the way it grows randomly. And that's really one of the joys of seedlings in fairly loose, informal planting like this. Let them be, let them happen and enjoy them. So for example, over there, on the path, in amongst the bricks, we've got some cowslips growing. Now I think they look great. Now, this isn't much to look at for the moment, but you can see the distinctive foliage of an aquilegia, slightly stained with purple and chocolate. And I love aquilegias, and we have them all over the garden. And one of the reasons we have them all over the garden is because they do self-seed prolifically, and they seem to prefer the edges of things. You can see how this is right hard up against the wooden edging. And not only do they self-seed prolifically, but they hybridize all the time. So sometimes you get wonderful variations. So I let them flower, not always as good as I want them to be, but often sheer delight. But there's no reason why you couldn't move it. If you've got a seedling like this in your garden, just carefully lift it up and reposition it where you want it. And in fact, although I'm going to leave this, that's exactly what I'm going to do with another seedling that I've got over there. Now I've noticed here a self-sown Alchemilla mollis. Alchemilla mollis works well almost in every garden, but it's got a particular yellowy, greeny tinge to the flowers. So it is perfect for the effects that I'm trying to build up on the mound. So I'm going to dig this up and transplant it over at the mound. The soil is still very wet and claggy. And the beauty of Alchemilla is that it will grow in shade, it'll grow in sun, it'll grow in sand, it'll grow in clay, it'll grow in chalk. It's a really accommodating plant. So we'll pop that in there, and that will go to the mound, and that will be potted up. Now, we're going to Somerset, to a garden near Taunton. It belongs to Nigel Palfrey. And he's created it over the last 50 years into something that is distinctly unique.
My garden is therapeutic. It's always evolving. It's quirky, it's eccentric. And I suppose, as people often politely hint, it's like me. My style of planting is informal, casual. The foxgloves are all self-seeded. I like the self-seeding. Yeah, it's quite cheap, really. Although it's slightly overgrown, I think Breeza Maxima is certainly one of my favourites. It's short-lived, but it's a happy plant. It draws the eye in by its colour, its texture, its tone. I love grasses because it's like a moth. When you start to study them closely, you realise what patterns, variation, colours. And I cut a few, and then I hang them up for 2 or 3 days, let them dry, then tie them up with string. And during the winter months, I can look at that. Some areas are quite controlled. There's a lot of little vistas, a lot of little garden rooms. That's part of it. That's what it makes it so interesting. Occasionally I come along and pull something up, but invariably it can get on with it. I made the gate about 25 years ago. Now this is standing dead sweet chestnut, and it's got a little hole here so the hedgehogs can come through, and it's dog-proof. And then you've got the cotoneaster growing over that, lovely. Come on, Ruru. Come in. Yeah. This is hamstone, which is local. It was a gatepost. It was in the salvage yard, and I paid 1 tin of drink. I've been influenced very much by the past. Over the years, I've had great interest in building, architecture, horticulture, agriculture. So I've always had this interest. You go to the salvage yard, you could pick up real gems. I've just got that zest for it, I suppose. When I built this garden, it was with the intention that I live here and a lot of other things, what we call nature. Birds, insects, anything. So I know I'm also contributing to wildlife. Now these are naturally hollow. I've put salvage lead on the top, and they're for bats, frogs. The great tits will go in there. The small holes, that's for blue tits. So this is my crinkle crankle folly. And I got the idea from this branch. As you come down through, a lot of shade, so of course ferns like it. The idea is something like The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings. Crinkle crankle really means twisted, bent. I think it's lovely words. Years and years ago, before barbed wire, netting, string that was invented, you used the resources that you had to hand. Now what does last long is sweet chestnut, standing dead, and oak. You cannot just go into a wood and take anything. You should ask permission. Quite often people will say, yes, you can have it, you're welcome to it. So anyway, I started, and it's taken 2 bottles of whiskey, 2 jars of jam, a large bag of chocolate, many thank yous, and 1 burnt out clutch because I overloaded my car. We're 3 tons and over 1,000 screws. I always think a good garden always should be full of secrets, full of excitement, and this is excitement through here. I'm not really sure what you would call this room. We have tea in here sometimes. In the summertime, it's lovely, especially when it's hot. The birds rather like it in the wintertime. And of course there's a robin up here now, which proves that I'm not the only one that likes it. I never use a drawing, you do it all in your head, rather like an artist with a painting. You know, usually you've got an idea, but it's in the subconscious. And once you start, you just keep going. A number of people come in and they all leave smiling. So I know that it makes people happy, and I get great pleasure out of that.
I think Nigel exemplifies a really important aspect of gardening, which is just to have fun, to enjoy every aspect of it. We're so solemn about gardening, with its Latin names and rare plants and plants that are difficult to grow and what we should and shouldn't do, and forget that sometimes the main reason to garden is to enjoy it. Last year, we set about creating a new eating area here at Longmeadow to do exactly that. And we decided that it should include lots of fragrant culinary herbs. We used to have here a small paved area in the middle, surrounded by box hedges, but they were much wider than they were high. And I like them very much, but they suffered terribly from box blight. Now, because this is going to be where we eat, I'm going to plant a pot of very basic Mediterranean herbs. Now, I'm going to start with rosemary. And this is an upright variety called Miss Jessop's Upright, which is great for a pot because it leaves room around it to grow other herbs. And I've got some sage. Now, this is Salvia officinalis. By the way, if you're growing salvia for cooking, much better to have sage that's green. Green sage is better for the kitchen than purple sage. And finally, we have thyme. Now, this is actually lemon thyme, but ordinary thyme is as good as anything else. All three share the same growing conditions. They are Mediterranean herbs, and they like really good drainage and critically poor soil, and that's what you have to try and recreate. So we've got all this grit, and underneath it I've got a bag of peat-free compost, and I'm going to mix them up. The ideal mix is 50% horticultural grit, 50% peat-free compost. Right, that is perfect. That's exactly what I want. Now, this pot has got a big drainage hole. So, you need a big crock over that. We need to make sure that our very free draining mix doesn't fall through the bottom. So we'll put some compost in. Right. That's about right. When you buy herbs, they tend to be in what you might call quite a rich compost. This is only a temporary compost. If they're to thrive and grow to their best, they do need this really, really sharp drainage. So pop that there like that, and then the sage can go around it. And my plan is to have the herbs to hand. If you just want to add a few fresh herbs to your meal, there's nothing like it. So finally, we'll add the thyme. Now, thyme is the one that likes shade least. Okay, that goes there like that. So that's it. That's really simple. So all I need to do now is just top that up. Right. There's one final finishing touch, which both makes it look better and also has a practical purpose, which is to add a layer of grit onto the surface. And the reason why it's practical is because when it rains or you water it, the compost will splash up and go on the leaves, and this will keep it clean. So just fill in the gaps. And as for watering, I would say a light watering weekly. And the water should run out the bottom. And if you're putting them on a hard surface, put put them up on chocks. And this means that we have fresh, delicious Mediterranean herbs where we're going to eat, and it looks good too. Last summer, Advolly went to visit another historic garden, Plas Brondanw in Gwynedd, with the backdrop of the spectacular Watery National Park.
This is an architect's garden based around the views and vistas of the surrounding mountains. And when you're surrounded by such an incredible landscape, the results are breathtaking. The garden was the creation of a single unique designer, Clough Williams-Ellis. And it reflects Williams-Ellis's personal taste in every step, stone and statue. Born in 1883, Bertram Williams-Ellis, known to all by his middle name Clough, was a Welsh architect and environmentalist. He fought all his life to preserve the unique character of the gardens and buildings around rural Britain, particularly North Wales, where he grew up. Clough Williams-Ellis is best known for Portmeirion, the Italianate town that he created about 5 miles from here on the Welsh coast. But it was this garden at his ancestral home that he loved the most. He said, "It was for Brondanw's sake that I worked and stinted. For its sake, I chiefly hoped to prosper." He inherited the property in 1908 from his father. The house was crumbling and the garden had been turned into allotments. He spent the next 70 years lovingly rebuilding, still adding to the garden in his 90s when his budget would allow. Williams-Ellis said, "A cheque of £10 would come in and I would buy hedging to that extent. A cheque of 20 and I would pave a further bit of terrace." And in this manner, his garden came together piece by piece. The garden is divided into several small rooms, filled with the eccentric objects that Williams-Ellis collected over a lifetime. The use of tall yew hedging and narrow passages leads you through gaps, finding surprises around every corner. It could feel confused, but all these spaces are linked through his love of local materials, which can be seen throughout the whole garden. Looking around, you immediately get a sense of place. The slates in the walls are from quarries in this valley. And some have been recycled. Look at this one. It has a hole in it where it was once used as a roof tile. He loved a bit of make do and mend. And offset against the greens and grey, he added splashes of colour that shine out all year round. This turquoise and gold detailing was inspired by the garden's history. The turquoise represents the sea and the gold, the sand. Believe it or not, until 1811, the sea stretched up much further into the estuary below the garden, until a sea wall called the Cobb was built in the coastal town of Porthmadog. In the space of a few years, 2,000 acres of farmland were reclaimed from the sea. Plas Brondanw was no longer a seaside garden, but these colours are a reminder of its maritime history. And through the gate, you can sometimes see the peak of Erwyddfa or Snowdon, because Williams-Ellis designed the garden around focal points like these, ensuring that each view acted like a picture frame. This framing technique was inspired by Williams-Ellis's love of Italian Renaissance gardens, which are full of avenues and vistas. Looking east to west, this long line of yews, gates and stone walls helps to frame the Moyle Hairbog mountain. This one here, an effect only slightly marred by the new trees growing outside the garden, which now block the view. But inside the garden, the views can be controlled. And at the end of every vista is an eye-catcher. No matter which way you look, you're always pulled forward to explore further. Williams-Ellis was a magpie when it came to statues, and he frequently visited reclamation sales from country houses, mixing and matching whatever he could find. On one wall sits a classical trio of busts and statues. But turn a corner and you'll find a much more modern, baby-faced fireman with working hose. And some statues are complete fabrications. This bust of Caesar, for example, has a classical pillar, a plaque saying it came from Napoleon's estate. But actually, all three pieces were bought separately, glued together to create this marvellous piece of historical fiction. The garden continues outside the walls into a woodland with the greatest surprise yet. During World War I, Williams-Ellis served as an officer in the Welsh Guards. He married in 1915 and at the end of the war was offered a traditional silver serving plate as a wedding present from his fellow officers. But instead, he asked them to help him build a ruined castle on a nearby hillside, the final piece he needed for his garden. This is so typical of Clough Williams-Ellis's philosophy. The folly is made from local stone. What could be more romantic and personal than a collapsing castle? Also, it fits with the countryside, nestling into these mountains with a perfect view of the landscape he loved. Apparently, when Williams-Ellis asked for this folly instead of a silver platter, his commanding officer said, "It's an odd sort of present, I must say." But standing here with Wales at my feet, I know which one I would choose.
Despite that being an extraordinary, grand and beautiful garden set in that magnificent scenery, there was one little touch that struck me as something that we could all relate to, which was this idea of getting £10 and, yeah, I can go and buy some hedging plants. Or if you get £20, you buy some stone. Of course, you can multiply that up, and over the years, it accumulates.
Now, still to come on today's programme. Sue visits a garden in Carmarthenshire that makes the most of its watery site to foster wildlife.
I don't have a water feature in my garden, but maybe I should. Watching the weather run across the sky and its reflection in the ponds below is hypnotic and incredibly relaxing.
But first we're off to Cornwall to pay another visit to the extraordinary garden
hang on.
of Vicky Ward and Maxine Stringer.
OK. The Lottie is the ultimate coastal garden retreat. Prepare yourself to be a little bit surprised.
Wait, I thought we were waiting for you because you went first last time. Right, OK, you go first.
My name's Maxine.
And I'm Vicky.
And we are in our coastal garden. She's just on the outskirts of Polperro in Cornwall. So historically, in the olden days, to subsidise the fishing industry of the village, there were working gardens, coastal gardens, allotments, hence why we lovingly call our space the Lottie, as a friendly wink to that.
We've got a tiny old fisherman's cottage. Unfortunately, there is no garden. But I say unfortunately, because if we had have had one, we would have never have discovered this.
Our lives are incredibly busy, and it's great to have a piece of escapism.
A lady who lives in the village has got an allotment next door, and she very kindly showed us up here, and we just loved it. It's accessed only from the coastal path down sort of quite a steep slope. There aren't any steps.
Oh, nearly there.
It opens up into a three-tiered space, hence why we have ladders and all sorts to get from A to B. And we didn't used to have ladders, did we?
No, that's quite a luxury. This is the last tree we bring. Or is it?
When we got to our allotment space, I mean, it was just incredibly difficult. You couldn't even get access down to it. Yeah, anything that'll hurt you was there.
We decided fairly early on that it would be lovely to combine a space that we could enjoy, but equally it also be complementary to the vista and to the wider environment.
We call this a circus. It was inspired by a trip we had in our camper van where we saw a fire pit with circular seating and thought, that'd be brilliant for the Lottie. I saw the sign in a vintage shop, so it became the circus, and it started us naming all the different zones.
So the feel that we were looking for in this area is quite jungly, but equally I would like, the vision was to be quite nestled. This is St John's wort. The bees love it, and many of the other pollinators that we have here, and it actually acts as a natural windbreak. That hebe was planted probably, gosh, 6-7 years ago, and it was tiny. I clearly hadn't appreciated quite how much it had enjoyed Lottie life. It's found its spot, shall we say.
The aeoniums started off with just a very small plant, probably 2 plants, and it just went crazy. We never expected for them to like it so much.
Tree ferns like it to be fairly moist, and up here, certainly in the summer months, it can be quite barren and quite dry. But thanks to Vicky's research, she's got some magic food that she puts on it.
We actually used alpaca poo. It comes in liquid form, thankfully, through the post.
We're not bringing alpacas up here.
No, not yet. You never know.
And it's gone off like topsy though, hasn't it?
Yeah. One of the areas down here is particularly challenging because you've got sun all day. It's very drying. There's been a lot of trial and error with what works down here. And I found that the best thing that works is wildflower seeds. I'm not sure it works for Maxine because she always goes to me, did you want it to look like that?
This is true.
You said it the other day.
Is this the look you were going for, Vicky?
We inherited the bear's breeches. It's taken quite something to actually have something other than the bear's breeches. We've planted verbena and there's a bottlebrush.
Getting here from the house varies really, depending on what one is choosing to bring up. So, for example, if you're just bringing up a few bedding plants, that will take probably 20 minutes.
But if you're carrying a shed, 10 hours.
That did happen.
It did happen. In the olden days, they used to bring things up and down on donkeys, so that would have been helpful. Can we get a donkey?
Let's give it some thought.
Hi, Andy.
We're in the Zen garden, and this area really is all about that opportunity to exhale.
But it is very exposed. It gets dry very quickly, And also, if it's cold or it's really windy, things get damaged. We did have 2 echiums that were in here, and unfortunately, they just didn't work through the winter. So we've recently put succulents in, because succulents really work in here.
The other plant that I particularly like to have dry boots would be the mallow. That's really running on and on.
This is the Zen Den. When you've got a vision of something, it's all about getting there. So that's what motivates me. Because I remember the day we finished this, we were just so euphoric.
Absolutely elated.
It works really well as a water collector. So we utilise the bamboo here, so it comes off the roof and then flows into this old 50-gallon galvanised tank here.
This area makes me feel as though it's OK to put your clippers down and sit down and relax and enjoy.
And you feel like you're somewhere else.
Yeah, it's OK.
Maxine suggested that we went for a Mediterranean garden.
There's a few plants that seem to have found their happy place there. An olive tree. There is a lemon tree. There is a salvias. Californian poppies really like it there.
It just brings me so much joy. I don't know how else I can put it, really.
The lottie means everything. It's an opportunity for not only the plants' personalities to shine, but also our personalities, our creativity. You don't need to conform here. We spend our days conforming and adhering to rules, and no rules. It's great.
Now, this area here is a new eating area, and it gets the evening light beautifully. Now, I've made pots of herbs, and we've got mint, we've got rosemary and sage and thyme, but these 2 little beds need planting up. And the soil is terrible. It's very thin topsoil, and then packed gravel, and underneath that are cobbles and stone. So rather than dig them out and improve the soil, I've got plants that will cope with those conditions and also relate to the herby feel. So I have 3 plants. I've got lavender, and this is a variety called Phenomenal, which I've chosen for its robustness and hardiness. I've got Artemisia. Now, this is a beautiful silvery colour. The leaves are rather feathery, and it can grow really quite big. But like the lavender, it can be clipped hard. And that's one of the things I want to do here, is clip them and get a sort of rolling, flowing shapes. The last of the trio is the Santolina, or cotton lavender. Again, you've got this glaucous grey, Mediterranean shrub, little yellow flowers, but also can be clipped into smaller round balls. Now, can you see in there, it's a material called cut and run, which is the waste material from quarrying stone that are used on motorways. And I bought about 5 or 6 lorry loads of it 30 years ago for paths and what have you here. And it seems solid, but actually it drains very well. And a lot of plants would really struggle if they had to grow in that. But these Mediterranean shrubs thrive in those conditions. This is what they like. This Artemisia is a variety called Palace Castle. And it's lovely and relatively compact, but it is more tender than other Artemisias. But you can take cuttings, and what we've found with Mediterranean plants in general, it's the combination of wet and cold that does for them. So as long as the drainage is good,
They're much hardier and much more likely to survive. So the top of the compost, as it was in the pot, is slightly above soil level, just to ensure that it's not going to sit in the wet. Okay, that's one. Let's do the next. "30 years ago, when we laid this, little did I know that 30 years on I'd be hacking away at it, trying to dig it out to plant into. Well, there we go. Right. So resist any temptation to add compost or goodness underneath the plant. Now this will never get very big. Santolina can make a ball something like that, I would say, but no bigger. So what I'll do is let it flower, and when it's finished flowering, cut it back. This is an intermediate lavender. There's angustifolia, which is the more common type, but intermediate tends to sprawl a bit more. Now, just because they need poor soil and they love hot sun and they need good drainage, it doesn't mean to say that you shouldn't water them. While I'm planting the rest of these, it's time to join Sue, who's travelled to Carmarthenshire to visit a garden attached to a house that is built on stilts.
This garden is very artfully woven all the way around the wooden house, with a magnificent pond as its centrepiece. What I love about this garden is there's lots of little vignettes like this one, framed by the big goat willow behind me, and then these huge hosta leaves contrasting with the opening fronds of the ferns. And then these delightful artistic bird feeders hanging from the trees. The wooden house that sits in the garden was built in 1960, but it was after 1998, when textile designer Paula and her husband Ian moved here, that the garden was reimagined into this stunning biodiverse site. So this is a delightful garden you've created, and very unusual with this super large pond.
Oh, thank you, Sue. It's lovely to have you here, to be able to share it with you. This is our favourite place to sit in the morning for coffee, just listening to the birds. It's a beautiful spot. And we can sit out here even in the winter because it's a lovely little sun trap.
Cutched in. Do you manage it all yourself?
No, I can't confess to have done it all on my own. It is my project. I do have help from my husband with the heavy jobs and the high jobs too. The house being wooden, it feels like a kind of bird hide or something. Well, I think we're really lucky. At the front, we overlook the estuary, the Towie estuary, so the view out there is constantly changing. So to have water behind and in front of the house, it's just so relaxing. When we bought the land, it was just all overgrown with brambles and nettles and goat willow. So we knew there was potential out here. We could see that there was some trace of a pond behind the house. So we got a big digger in and he cleared the land for us.
It must have been really exciting to have a complete blank canvas. Where did you start?
Yes.
How did you start?
Well, I did start on paper. I did some scribblings, just trying to work out where the paths should be, and having cleared the land, we could then see quite clearly where the sun was at different times of day. We wanted some height within the space, so we planted trees. Some may say too many, but I do love it. You know, we've got the oaks giving us shades, and the silver birch are just beautiful. Even in the winter, they just glow.
Looking around at the colours, you've got a very selective palette here. Is that deliberate?
It is very deliberate. Friends that know me well know that I'm not a big fan of colour. If it was just for me, it would all just be green. But, you know, the garden is for wildlife, so the colours are here for the pollinators.
For me, you know, pink is my favourite thing, and I'm loving the campions. And the way you've planted it is really quite ethereal and magical, this little area behind you.
Oh.
It's really beautiful at the moment. You can see all the bees buzzing around, so you're definitely achieving what you set out to do.
We do have a resident family of moorhen.
Do they help with the slugs?
I don't know if they eat the slugs. They eat everything else.
I'm guessing it wasn't difficult to create a bog garden here.
No, it is naturally boggy, and some of these plants were here already, like the iris pseudochorus. Others we've introduced, the Bistota officinalis, Candelabra primula. It just keeps on flowering. It just keeps on climbing up and up and up, and it really is a good giver. You know, we've just developed that use of the yellow.
It really highlights some of the green around, doesn't it, and brings it to life.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're a big hit with the bees too.
I can see that. I don't have a water feature in my garden, but maybe I should. Watching the weather run across the sky and its reflection and silhouettes in the ponds below is hypnotic and incredibly relaxing. I'm in one of the many seating areas in the garden, which give you lots of different perspectives to enjoy the vistas. Gardening on a gradient like this is a bit like having an amphitheatre full of plants, and so you can see them all in their glory. And viewed from the bottom, it's like one massive tapestry of colour and texture. But having big borders like that can be difficult to maintain on a slope. Paul has got round this by creating lots of hidden pathways, and each plant is allowed its own space, and it's got a heavy mulch, so you can get right up close and personal to be able to tend to the plant and maintain the garden. It's really accessible. On the other side of the garden at the front of the house, Paul has created something quite different. Listen to that lovely crunching sound of cockle shells beneath my feet. Paula's a woman after my own heart, as I have used these in my garden. It's a waste product of the Welsh cockle industry, and it really gives a lovely beachy feel to this whole area, which was inspired by Prospect Cottage by Derek Jarman in Dungeness, and it's one of my favourite gardens too. It uses silverleaf plants such as stachys and santalina repeated throughout, and it also uses marine salvage, which I love. And I particularly like these driftwood uprights. I've been collecting some driftwood and didn't really know how to use it, but this has given me some great ideas. And over here, they've really upped the ante with this massive cardoon. Again, it's a big display of silver leaves. It's not yet reached its final height. It's going to grow much bigger. So it gives it a real structural element. It brings height to the garden, and it'll have these massive flowers. And as long as the Welsh winds don't knock them out, they'll stay on throughout the winter, giving that interest. It's a really lovely piece of gardening. I've really enjoyed exploring this amazing garden. It blends beautifully with the surrounding green, watery estuary landscape. It's given me so much to think about for my own garden.
Go on.
I was very taken by Paula's comment that she would have been happy with a garden that was entirely green. And it is interesting what we take for granted. We assume that colour is good and that somehow green is a lesser colour or background colour. And of course it isn't. There's more variety of green than any other colour. And of course every single garden depends upon green as its basis that everything else is set against. And I like the idea of an all-green garden too. Certainly here in the dry garden, it's pretty much all green at the moment. And I want to add a bit more green to that mix. This is a bay tree to replace the olive that I had planted in here. Olive trees in this climate are always a bit dodgy, and certainly it didn't survive last winter. Now I was going to dig out the roots and plant another tree in its place, but to do so would cause so much collateral damage, I've decided to put this bay temporarily in a pot on there to give myself that height. And then I'll dig out the roots of the olive in the winter when all this has died back. Now let me show you these. This is a pot, it costs £9, full of little bay plants. And if I take it out of the pot like this and tease out one of the plants, if I just separate the roots out, trying not to do too much damage, here we go, this one. There you can see that is a perfectly healthy little bay seedling. If I pot that up or put it outside, that will grow on, and I can grow and train a piece of topiary like this in the fullness of time. It just so happens I know that this is 7 years old, so it would take 7 years to go from this to that. But for the moment, bay isn't ridiculously expensive, and an awful lot of people buy bay lollipops like this and have them outside their front door or out the back or whatever. And it's a Mediterranean plant, so it must have good drainage. And that's why I'm going to put it in a pot, because if I put it in the ground, A, it's too wet for it here, and B, we've had lots of bay killed by extra hard frost. So, I've got this lovely pot, and I'm going to put this in a position before planting it up, because it's heavy. There we go. I've mixed up a compost mix of 50% grit. That's a lot. It's really gritty, really free draining. I've added then 25% sieved garden compost, so that's going to give it some goodness, and then 25% Accoya-based compost. So very free draining, but with some goodness added to it. Well, I think that looks good. And it adds another shade of green to the garden, and that's all good. However, we've still got spots of colour, particularly from the irises. Well, I'm afraid that's all for today, but I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next time. Till then, bye-bye.
you.